Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we tackle a single relevant question based on our Bible reading for that day. This week our reading is centered around the book of 3 John, and today I'm joined by Sheryl Daughety and Jay Rivenbark, and we're going to dive into a question here from our reading. So it says, there was supplemental reading from John chapter 15. And it said, "This is my commandment, love each other in the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you slaves because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends, since I have told you everything the Father told me. You didn't choose me, I chose you. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit so that the Father will give you whatever you ask for using my name. This is my command, love each other." Verse 13 says, "There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends." Here he is, I believe, specifically pointing to his own death, that he's going to lay down his physical life. But most of us don't have that. Even opportunity, much less expectation. So I think he's probably also speaking broader, in a broader context. So what does it mean to lay down your life for your friends? What does that mean?
For him in particular, it also meant that he had laid down his plans for his life, his desires for his life, and his time for the people not only that were his friends, but who became his friends through Christ and all of the work that he did, which is ultimately what I think he is calling us to do.
Mm-hmm.
That those things become less and less important, what our own plans and desires are, the own selfish things we like to do with our time and our money, our gifts, all those things that the greatest way we can use those is to serve the people in our lives. And that, in a sense, that really is laying down our life,
Right.
I think.
Yeah, I think the fact that the things that how we serve, what we sacrifice, time, I think probably at the top of that, resources, desires to serve other people is absolutely a form of laying down one's life. I would argue that there are probably people that we should be serving and loving and sacrificing for, that it probably would be easier to give our lives for than to live for them sacrificially in that way.
You mean dying would be easier?
Yeah, that we would answer that call probably quicker than we process the struggle of that daily sacrificing and giving up for other people, whether it be the things of God or for people that we're in relationship with.
Can you give some more examples, like concrete, fleshed out examples, how that would play out in a day-to-day?
Well, as it relates to how we lay our lives down, I think there's some obvious places where it should be happening. If you're in a marriage relationship, I think that would be an obvious one that we can identify with, that there are times that I need to be considerate of her opinion or feelings rather than demanding my own way. That's a form of laying down, sacrificing and serving. And other relationships may look different at different levels, but there are opportunities every day to sacrificially serve and give to other people. Even something as simple as, and I had this encounter recently where I met this, what obviously to me was a homeless person, and I had a choice and decision to make. Am I going to lay down part of my time to go introduce myself, get to know a little bit about that person, which when I did, attached itself to another opportunity to help because they presented me with a need that they had, and then I had another opportunity either to lay down, which required some financial assistance on my part as well as additional time to make that come into play. But the reality is that opportunity was there, and thankfully I felt like I chose to be sacrificial in that moment, to serve rather than to being completely selfish and ignore that person and that opportunity altogether.
The thing that keeps coming to my mind are people who have to be physical caretakers for people. And it's exhausting work mentally and physically. And, those people really do lay their lives down. And I'm not even just talking about people who get paid to do this. I mean, people who end up with their parents or grandparents or extended
Or children.
family. Yeah, in their house that live with them 24 hours a day. Sometimes it's children, like you said, who were born that way, or they've adopted children, like, who need that type of care. And I have watched it from the outside and just thought to myself with so much respect that that person literally lays down their life every single day for that other person. Because there's things that they need and want to do with their time and their life, but they're choosing for that person's need to become more important than their own for months, years for a lot of people. It is a long, long, hard process.
I saw a beautiful illustration of what it means to lay down your life for other people. Sunday, there's a young couple in the church who have a young child of their own, and they have chosen to provide foster care for challenged individuals. And they currently have a child that has severe physical and mental challenges, that cannot even function, doesn't have mobility on their own. And, to see that played out just touched my heart. I mean, here they are, a young family trying to make their own way with their own young child that requires a lot of attention, but yet they have chosen to lay down their life to give life to somebody else that apparently nobody else has that much interest in. And it really touched my heart, to see that level of sacrifice.
Yeah, the first time I recall seeing somebody being a caretaker like that, I was young. My dad was pastor in Wilmington when I was young. We went there when I was 4. And so sometime in the next 10 years, this person would have come to our church. The lady did. I don't remember a husband, but she had a son who had severe issues. I mean, he was bound in a wheelchair, that it was almost like a rolling high chair because there was always a tray on it, because he was constantly making a mess. He was drooling on himself. And I remember as a kid thinking, gosh, that's got to be how do you do that? Because I would see he had medicine he had to take every day, and she had to force it in his mouth, and sometimes he would bite her fingers, and she would bring him to church, and her name was Joy. That's what I remember. I can't think of what her last name was. And I remember my mom and dad remarking about how difficult that probably had to be. And in our congregation, during the 21 days of prayer and fasting, there was a card from a lady who has 2 children who have some specific special needs. And they're adults at this point, but she's their sole caretaker. And over the recent years, she's had numerous health issues and having some right now. Just this past Sunday, when I walked by and talked to her, she was telling me she was struggling with different things. But all 21 days, because that card was in my private stack, the thing that crossed my mind when I prayed for her is what's going to happen to those girls if
Mhm.
something happens to her?
Mhm.
You know, who else is going to lay down their life for them?
Mm-hmm.
You know, or are they going to be an afterthought? You know, like that's the one thing every day when I prayed, I thought about what's going to happen to
And there's
them.
not a day of their mama's life that she's not
Thinking that.
thinking the same
Yeah,
thing.
who's going to do that?
Yeah.
You know that's a good example. I think there are times when laying down our life becomes too much of our identity. So let me give an example. I think men in general, this is stereotypical, but men in general view themselves as the provider. The danger of that is that our work or our career becomes our identity.
Mhm.
And we excuse ourselves by saying, I'm doing it for you. You know, I'm doing it so my kids can have this. I'm doing it so I can provide a house for you. You know, that those things, I think if we're not careful, what started as an intent to be humble and obedient turns into something that is a detriment and a harm at the same time, you know, and almost a martyr syndrome. You know, there are people who I think lay down their lives, and then there are other people who want the credit for laying that you know what I'm saying. They want that, and so I think it's very dangerous. I think that there has to be humility with it that comes along with it at the same time. Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us next week as we start a conversation around the book of Jude.